started going. I'm sorry. At home, and this might shock and stun and deeply sadden a lot of people, people are sick and tired of reporters standing up and yelling questions, in this case, where he was clearly yelling questions out of turn. And so, I don't know. Mika, what do you think?
It's a tough one. I think the story's going to speak for itself, and the reaction to it will speak for itself. And I know how it's going to go, and I'm not going to bother to say it.
I will say this. If Barack Obama were standing there and somebody else was asking a question and somebody decided to stand up and make a political statement.
There was an intensity in a
well, the guy
statement
flew all the way out there to ask a question. Right. I think I'd seen him on CNN last night. This is a very big moment for him. This is 15 minutes of fame. And you can be shocked and stunned and deeply saddened at Donald Trump's immigration policy. We've been critical of what he said on the air here. But if I'm holding a press conference, or you're holding a press conference, you're holding a press conference, and you saw a guy, you know, trying to get his 15 minutes in fame the night before, you know, and pretending he was Walter Cronkite on the convention floor when or Dan Rather on the convention floor with Daley's thugs pulling him out, when actually this was all staged by you.
I'm putting the filter back on.
No, I'm sorry.
Aww.
It's just the truth. The guy was making a political... You got a question to ask.
I don't disagree.
Ask a question. If you want to make a political statement, you can hold your own press conference.
Couple of things. Reporters are not hired necessarily to be...
That exchange with Major Garrett when he asked something that was perceived as impolite and the media went crazy that he wasn't polite. So that's to your point. The backdrop Donald pointed out is that he's suing Univision for $500 million. I don't like seeing any journalist hauled out of a room like that physically, but there's a way press work. And Donald Trump clearly would have called on Jorge Ramos. He called on him twice after the fact. And Casey Hunt actually was in the room. Be interested to hear her point of view. She's in Dubuque, Iowa. What was it like in the room, Casey?
Hey, Willie. I think that it was an extraordinarily uncomfortable and difficult situation. I think on the one hand, you're absolutely right. I mean, I've been in hundreds of these types of press conferences. Often you get to know the politician you're asking questions of, whether they like to call on people, whether it is in many ways a question simply of who yells the loudest. Both go that way, or go different ways. I think in this particular case, there were other options for Trump than to have him ejected right at the beginning, but I do think it's interesting that he ultimately brought him back in. That's in some ways a mea culpa for Trump, and a rare one at that. You guys know as well as anyone that he really doesn't tend to back down off of anything, and in this case he did let Ramos back into the room. You know, he also suggested that he didn't know who Ramos was in some of the follow-up questions, but, you know, his first response did mention Univision. So I think that it may be a little bit questionable as well. But, you know, at the end of the day, Trump did bring Ramos back into the room, and he was able to, as you saw, have that exchange. And you can judge that how you will.
Casey, as a reporter, what do you think about another, and I'll put it in quotation marks right now, another reporter giving a speech while the rest of you just watch and turning a press conference into a grand spectacle?
Look, Joe, I think that, you know, all of us have to decide how we're going to conduct ourselves in those rooms, right? But I do think that what happened at the top of that back and forth, the idea that somebody is going to be thrown out, silence, not allowed.
But Casey,
is something that gives a lot of reporters pause.
He wasn't asking a question.